Good morning, Mount Olive family and friends of Mount Olive, all you who are tuning in for another Friday devotion. Hope you've got to listen to all the ones so far this week. Brother Jody's message on Sunday was very good. I was not there personally, but got to listen to it. That's the one good thing about having YouTube. If you're not there, you can still listen to the service. So I thought he did a great job talking about Lot and Abraham and all that they did. So let me go ahead and we'll share my screen with you, I hope. So this is a picture of New York City, for some of you who may have been there. I have not, but I entitled this picture Bright Lights, Big City. And I guess you could think of that a lot, thinking about Sodom. Could have been the same thing. I guess, some people refer to New York City as the present day Sodom. But the title of our devotion this week, I've entitled it Losing Your Influence. Now, Brother Jody used these verses in Genesis 13 and chapter 10, or chapter 13, verse 10. He says, "And Lot lifted up his eyes, beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar." So the other gentlemen all the other guys who've been talking about this, some of them have used this verse, and we know that this is when Lot and Abraham, they had so much flocks and herds that they were starting to be some conflict. So Abraham said, "Choose you, which one? You go this way and I'll go that way." So Lot, he saw all that, the plains of Jordan, that they were well watered. I've underlined well watered everywhere. Now this would have been prime grazing acreage for Lot's livestock and for growing crops for his family and for the families of his herdsmen. But notice after the comma, a lot of things can happen after the comma. And it says that, it says, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So it was a well-watered plain, but that was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It's a different story sometimes after God's judgment. Let's go on to verse 11. It says, "Then Lot chose him all the plains of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves one from the other. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom." I've underlined this word "toward." He says he pitched his tent toward Sodom. What does "toward" mean? Does it mean it was just looking at the city, or facing Sodom, or in that general direction? Let's take a look at "forward" in the Hebrew language. And we'll give you a Hebrew language study this time. In English, if it's "toward," in Hebrew, it's just as it looks, it's "at." That's how it's spoken. So the meaning of it, as far as relating to space or area, is as far as, even to, or up to. So Lot pitched his tent as far as, even to, up to the city of Sodom. It takes on a little different meaning, doesn't it, when you can look at that word and see that, Lot got right up next to the city and he started rubbing elbows with it. And here is where the problem lies with that. The Bible says in verse 13, it says, "But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly." Now, this would have seemed to have been a known fact. This should have been common knowledge, but for Lot, but he just snuggled right on up there. And sometimes, when you snuggle up close to sin, its effects will, can just jump right off on you if you're not careful. So Lot's choice was based on sight alone. He didn't take the time to seek God for an answer. He didn't seek the advice of his uncle, who was a godly man and would have given him wise counsel. He didn't even honor his uncle by letting Abraham, who was older, choose first. Abraham and Lot, they separate, they go their different ways, and time passes. Next time that we hear about Lot, it's in verse chapter 14, and that's in Lot 8. And it says, and there went out the king of Sodom and the king of the Gomorrah and the king of Admah and the king of Zebulun and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the vale or the valley of Sodom. And that's with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of the nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar. 4 kings with 5. So Chedorlaomer, he defeats the first 5 kings of the valley in the valley of Sodom. Now they were actually, it always talks about Sodom and Gomorrah, but there were actually 5 cities in that area. That's just a little history fact. And if you'll read there toward the end of the chapter, that Lot actually and his daughters actually journeyed to one of the cities. I won't say which one. You can look that up for yourself. So what happened to the other cities? They were destroyed along with Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's look at verse 11 and 12 here. It says, and they that being Chedorlaomer and all the 4 kings, they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah. They took all their victuals and they went their way. And they took Lot, Abraham's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Now, did you catch that? What has changed? Lot is now a citizen of Sodom. His tent is no longer pitched as far as even up to the city of Sodom. He is in the city itself, and he reaps the consequences of that. Now, one of the men who had been captured, he escapes, and he comes and tells Abraham that Lot has been taken, and Abraham takes his 318 trained fighting men, and he defeats the other kings and brings Lot back. Now, this was a great victory because these armies were big armies, but the difference was God was on Abraham's side, and the other kings, they didn't have God. So he defeats the other kings. He brings Lot back, his family, and all the people and all the goods that were taken from Sodom. Now, sometimes when we get ourselves in a mess, God will send a godly person our way to help us out of the mess we got ourselves in. But what happens to Lot? What happens next to him? Well, let's look in verse 19. Now, before we get there, if you'll remember in chapter 18, we talked about this in the past devotion. The Lord comes with 2 of his angels to Abraham. Abraham sitting in the tent in the plain of Mamre, and God tells him, he says, he is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, Abraham, he says, are you really going to, are you going to kill the righteous with the evil that's there in the city? He starts negotiating with God, and we all know he starts with 50 and he gets it down to 10. Now, did you ever notice that Abraham never mentions Lot by name? But we know the 10 would have been Lot, his wife, his 2 unmarried daughters, that's 4, his 3 married daughters, that's 7, and his 3 son-in-laws, which would be 10. So Abraham is saying, if there's 10, if there is Abraham and his family, that's there, will you not destroy it? God says he will. He said, if I can find 10, I'll not destroy it. So verse 19, in chapter 19, verse 1, it says, and there came 2 angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them and bowed himself with his face toward the ground. Now, Lot knew there was something different about these men. He knew that they were from God. Now, it says that Lot is now sitting at the gate leading into Sodom. Why was he there? Didn't he have anything to do, or was it just another place to be, or was it mere chance that he was there? Well, in Middle Eastern culture, the gate of a city was a very important place to be. Disputes were decided there by the elders or the judges that were there. Contracts and agreements were validated in front of these elders and judges. And matters of sin and disobedience were brought here to be heard and judged. It even says that disobedient children were to be brought to the gate and be judged for their disobedience. So, any young people listening out there, aren't you glad we don't have gates now? You know, I didn't have a gate growing up either, so I guess I'm glad for that also. So now we find Lot, who went from being Abraham's nephew, to having his own herds and flocks and living in the plain, to living in Sodom itself, to now having a leadership role in the city. Maybe Lot thought he could have a positive influence on the city of Sodom and change the culture. Now, was this God's plan for Lot or Lot's plan for Lot? I take it to be the latter. Peter tells us in the New Testament that Lot had a godly conscience, but it doesn't say that he sought God's guidance on decisions. I saw this quote that said, one of the most dangerous traps for a believer is a good thing that isn't a God thing. We may think it's good, but it's really, God's not in it. And that can be a serious downfall for us if we're not careful. Lot, he invites the two men to come to his house, and at first they refuse, but Lot insisted, and they agree. He fixes them a feast, and he provides food and comfort and shelter for the night. But what about safety? That's where it happens. The wicked men of Sodom come and they tried to take the men out of Lot's house. And we see Lot again. This time he's at the door of his house talking to the crowd, and that's in Genesis chapter 19, verses 6 and 7. It says, and Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. So Lot tries to talk to the crowd. He even calls them brethren or brothers because of his being a citizen and an official of the city, to use his influence to change their minds. But I believe that Lot knew he had lost his influence in this wicked city and to these wicked people. He lowers himself to even offering his two unmarried daughters who were virgins to the mob. Nowhere in all of this do we see that Lot prayed to God for guidance. Here he had two angels standing right there in his house who could have destroyed the mob with a puff of their breath or a wave of their hand, but he never thinks that all will be well if he just chooses to trust God. And then the people turn on him more. It says in Genesis 19:9, and they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn. Now they're talking about Lot, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them? And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. Now the mob shows Lot that he has no influence when they now refer to him as a sojourner, basically a guest or a passerby. Even though Lot had lived there for years, and they imply that now he thinks he's a judge, their anger increases. It turns on Lot, and he barely escapes their wrath when the angels pull him back into the house. The angels strike the mob with blindness, and they tell Lot that they're going to destroy the city. And if he has any sons or daughters or sons-in-law, then he needs to go to them and bring them out of the city. Now, Lot had lost influence with his daughter and his son-in-laws when he went and told them what the angels were going to do. And that's in verse 14. It says, and Lot went out and spoke unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, up, get thee out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his son-in-laws. We don't know if these sons-in-laws, if they were men of the city or were they once herdsmen for Lot that moved into the city. We don't know, but we also know that Lot had no influence over them or his daughters. We go back here to losing your influence. Lot's choices caused him to lose his influence. Lot, who had livestock and flocks and herdsmen, and their families who looked up to Lot for protection and their daily livelihood, well, he was left with what he had on his back and what he could carry out of Sodom. And what about the herdsmen? Have you ever thought about that? What about the herdsmen themselves and their families? How did Lot, he lost influence with them? Did they become part of the culture and wicked as well? We don't know. The Bible doesn't say, but we can wonder. Lot lost his position of influence he thought he had in and with the citizens of Sodom when they quickly, but that quickly left when he didn't give them what they wanted. He lost his influence with his married daughters and their husbands when he went to get them and take them to safety, and they refused and ridiculed him. And what caused Lot to lose his influence? He forgot about God in a way that Abraham remembered God. How did Abraham remember God? Brother Jody told us in his message. It says that Abraham would build an altar to God to show his love of God and as a reminder of what God had done for him. We never see Lot building an altar to God, just a self-serving altar to himself. When Abraham let Lot choose the well-watered plains for all the herds that he had, did Lot build an altar and thank God for the well-watered plains? No. Maybe if Lot had built an altar to God when he entered Sodom and sought God, things would have turned out better for that city and its people. Lot forgot about God, but God didn't forget about Lot. God still rescued him. Even though Lot lingered, the two angels, they took him and his wife and his two daughters by the hand and led them out of the city and told them to flee the destruction. Did he build an altar? Did he build an altar to thank God for saving him and his daughters from the destruction? No, he didn't. He just, the Bible says, that God is long suffering and he's not willing that any should perish. Now, if you're listening and you are lost, God's not concerned with your influence. He's concerned with your soul. The best advice is for you to be saved today and let God influence you, and then let you influence those around you. I hope you've enjoyed this devotion. I hope you have a good rest of the day on Friday. Hope to see you in church Sunday morning. If you don't have a church, you're welcome to come to Mount Olive. But ask you to be praying. I think Brother TJ will be back preaching on Sunday morning, if I'm not mistaken. So be praying for him. Be praying for all those who come, that God will meet a need in their lives. Hope you have a good weekend. Thank you for joining.